And one of the things that stood out for me, I was like, there's not enough representation in the right places here. Like there weren't really any people of color on the board or trustee board. So I saw how I was talked to when I walked in the room. I saw how I was shut out of certain committees, even though I was supposed to serve in my capacity because of who I was. And so all of that stuff fascinated me. And I literally was like, I want to be here because there's more kids like me coming behind me, and I need to be at the right place to make the right decisions for them. And so I intentionally sought out opportunities in higher ed, which means that I was like, next step, I'm going to be a residence director, and I'm going to get my grad school paid for, and I'm going to create a career in this thing. And I'm just going to be I'm going to be the person that I needed to see for someone else.
Welcome to Career Cheat Code. In this podcast, you'll hear how everyday people impact the world through their careers. Learn about their journey, career hacks, and obstacles along the way. Whether you're already having the impact you want or are searching for it, this is the podcast for you.
All right, Aleschia, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, I appreciate it. I know you and I were talking about this literally the week when the world shut down in March 2020, and you were supposed to be
and career chats off the ground. This is major.
Yeah, we were supposed to actually, make this happen for that first season. And then we took a break because the world stopped. But now that we're back, I'm very glad that you were able to take the time to connect with us. And, and let's dive right in. Let's tell the world what it is you do for a living.
So my official title, Executive Director of Summer Session and Continuing Studies. I think it's like a microcosm of what a college president would do. I say we run a mini college in the summer. So a little bit of everything, but that is my official title, Executive Director of Summer Session and Continuing.
Where do you do that?
And where do I do it at? I have the honor of doing it at Barnard College, which is one of the undergraduate institutions at Columbia.
Got it. So you just said a lot of good fancy words. What does that mean? What is it? What are you tasked with doing? And how does your role actually look like when you walk in on a Monday?
So I feel like why I like my role is because I get to do a little bit of everything. Like I think working in higher ed, usually you find people have specializations like financial aid or residence life or working in the library. I have to understand how it all works. So a Monday morning for me could start off with a meeting with like security or the Office of General Counsel or our academic affairs office. And then I'm spiraling down into residence life to find out what kind of buildings we're taking online, what kind of capital projects are going underway. It's really all about strategy and coming up with a plan that works for us to maximize our physical infrastructure in the summer months, but also our academic resources. How do we, package those for a new community of learners in the summer? So it really is a range of everything, and you get to know a little bit about everything to make a big pot of something, right? Like to make a good thing at the end. So a little bit of everything.
Okay. So summer session, how busy are the summers there? Is that like, does that mean that this is like the height of your role is leading up to different summers? How does that work?
Yeah. So the height of my role leads up to summer. So on a college campus, especially now, colleges are really wanting to figure out how to bring life to summer on their campus. So I think across the field, it's a trend that you're finding more and more college campuses doing things and doing more in the summer besides sending students away for internships. So for me, there's 3 buckets in my department. There are the summer session classes where we work with our faculty. They design classes. I like to call summer the lab, where you really get to step outside of the curriculum that is set forth during the year. You get to play a little bit. I think, students aren't taking 18 credits. Maybe they're only taking 1 class. So we can connect the class back to New York City a little bit more. I just think it's so much more fun. Not a knock to the spring and the fall, but I think the summer is a lot more fun. And then we offer classes for high school students so they can come and get a taste of life in college. That really is my passion work and why I got into pre-college and sort of was like, oh, you're really good at that. Let's give you all of summer. And then the other bucket is just working with other pre-college summer groups, adult learning groups to come to campus, and they simply will just lease our space. So it really is about just like like I said, maximizing all of our resources on the campus in the summer.
Is this what you always wanted to do for a living?
I don't think so. I don't think I knew it was something that could be done. Like when I went to undergrad, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a nurse. And, I sat for 1 semester of chemistry, got that good old D, and then was like, oh, I'm a for a couple more days. And I think by like day 2 of spring semester, I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and figure out something else.
That makes a lot of sense. So tell me, where'd you grow up? What was your upbringing like? And at that point, did you already have nursing in mind, or when did that start as well?
So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My mom went to Clara Barnard High School, which was then for nursing. My mom was one of 5. Her mom was a single mom. And so my mom really wanted to do nursing, but going to school when you don't have much takes away from families, right? So my mom was unable to finish nursing school. And so I think the career of being a nurse for me was more so like a nod to her and a way to say thank you to her. I don't think I ever really wanted to be a nurse. I think it was just like, oh, mommy wanted to be a nurse, so let me pursue this for her. That didn't work. See why you get your own dream.
Get your own dream.
Get your own dream. But I've always been passionate about school and learning. So I think me being in higher education is very fitting because like I've always been like a nerd that way.
Talk to me about senior year of high school. Is college a thing that is a no-brainer for you? That is something that you're absolutely doing? Or is that something that is kind of in the works, but not necessarily? And what ended up happening?
College was a no-brainer. Like, I think there are people in your life, regardless of your circumstance, that are just ridiculously instrumental. Number one, going back to my childhood pastor, Dr. Elliot Cuff, I shout him out all the time. He was a Harvard graduate. Dr. Cuff was like, his mom too, I believe, was like a single mom, had a lot of kids. He grew up like in the middle of the bush in Kansas, and he made it to Harvard. So like he made it a point, right? He would bring the HBCUs to our church to do shows. He would take us on college trips. He would use the networks that he had at Harvard to get us exceptional experiences. Like I remember one summer I went away to a boarding camp. I got a scholarship to a boarding school. So like his Harvard network brought a lot of resources to our church. And so to that end, everyone that I grew up with in that church went to college. It was just like, duh, we went to Smith and Hampton and, Syracuse, and we were out there. And so, yeah, college was a no-brainer for me. I had I was lucky enough to go to a really great high school in Brooklyn. I went to Middle College, which is now Medgar Evers High School College Prep or something like that. And it's connected to Medgar Evers. So we took like dual enrollment classes, and we were a part of the College Bound initiative, and we had a really dope college advisor. And they pushed it. My college advisor went to college through the Higher Education Opportunity Program at NYU. And so he was like, Aleschia, I think you could get in on this HEOP thing. And so we started exploring HEOP options for me, which was great because like my mom and my dad had split up, and my mom lost her job and had just finished chemotherapy. And like, we didn't know how we were going to pay for college, but I always knew like in game, you're going to college for sure.
Okay. And in your mind, did you want to go away, or did you want to stay kind of close to home? What was the thought process?
Oh, I was going away too.
Love that for you.
I wanted to go to my dream school because when I was younger, when I said my pastor used to bring the HBCUs to the church and their gospel choir. I always sung in the choir. I was like college, like the choir president and all that. And they came and would do like these wonderful spring concerts at my church. So I wanted to go to Bethune-Cookman College. And my mom was like, girl, I love that for you, but I ain't got it. So, I wasn't able to go to Bethune-Cookman, but luckily enough, I did get HEOPC at Mount St. Mary in Newburgh, and I knew I was going away. I like to say I'm a first generation college student on a technicality, right? But my cousins, my mother's cousins, my grandmother's brothers and sisters, they all went to college. Most of them have advanced degrees. So for my grandmother, like I say, she reset the poverty clock because she didn't finish her education. So that wasn't actualized in her lineage before me. And that makes a difference on her children's livelihood, but it didn't impact me as much because I had my cousins to see what they were able to do. I went and visited them at college, and my cousin was an RA. So I was like, no, I'm going away. So that was always in my head. I was going away.
Wow, that's great. And I love the nod to your grandmother for really being that one pillar that kind of has a bunch of trickling effects from there, right? That just spiraled and continue to inspire us to continue to, move forward from there. So that's amazing. So you get to school, you get to Mount St. Mary College in Newburgh, and you think about nursing. You end up not doing nursing. What did you actually end up majoring in?
I majored in psychology, and then like I was trying to double major in psych and public relations.
Okay.
I guess I see how they go together, but like whatever. So I ended up majoring in psych with a minor in PR.
Why?
Yeah.
Like, what was your thought process? What do you think you were going to do with that?
I think at the time, in all actuality, it was like, what's going to get me out of here? Like, I don't even think I was like, I might have taken Psych 101. I was like, oh, I like this. But I don't know that there was actual thought process behind it. I think it was that. And then we had one psych professor, Dr. Uzelic, who was just out of this world. Phenomenal. I knew I was never going to be a biopsychologist like she was, but like, I just wanted to sit under her and take all of her classes. So I think I took like 4 classes with her before I was done in undergrad. But if I was a psych major, I could sit in really interesting classes. So I think that's what led me to psych. It really wasn't like a career path thing.
So come senior year, you're about to graduate. What do you think is going to happen after you graduate? Like, what type of job do you think you're going to get, and what actually happens?
So whether I knew it or not, as I was going through college, I was really involved. I was freshman class president. I did student activities. I was SGA president my junior year. And all of that gives you like a behind the scenes look of how things work. And I was amazed. And one of the things that stood out for me, I was like, there's not enough representation in the right places here. Like there weren't really any people of color on the board or trustee board. So I saw how I was talked to when I walked in the room. I saw how I was shut out of certain committees, even though I was supposed to serve in my capacity because of who I was. And so all of that stuff fascinated me. And I literally was like, I want to be here because there's more kids like me coming behind me, and I need to be at the right place to make the right decisions for them. And so I intentionally sought out opportunities in higher ed, which means that I was like, next step, I'm going to be a residence director, and I'm going to get my grad school paid for, and I'm going to create a career in this thing. And I'm just going to be the person that I needed to see for someone else. So I was very intentional about going into higher ed. By the time senior year came, I was like, no, this is where I'm going. Yeah.
Okay. So how did that manifest? What ended up happening? Where'd you get a job?
I took the first job I got, which was nuts because there was more interviews to come at better places. It was like a small liberal arts college in Amish country. Okay. There might have been 3 Black people altogether at the institution. And it was very different. I think, it was one of the times where I realized, and it's something that I think we all come to, the Black experience is not a monolith, there's so many shapes and facets in the way in which we experience our Blackness. And I know this now, I'm very lucky to have been a Black woman from Brooklyn, New York. It's very different than being a Black woman from the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and the opportunities that are afforded you and how you go about the world and, the privilege that you carry even in your capacity as a Black woman when we often don't feel like we have privilege. Say all of that to say that college was not the place for me. Okay. I'm like, I didn't have all the tools in my toolbox to navigate that kind of fraught space. So I ended up quitting, not even a year in. I was like, that's not going to work for me.
After moving to Pennsylvania for this role, within a year, you decided to quit. Did you also break a lease? Would you?
No. So my job came with housing.
Okay.
And I was a residence director. And I mean, I just went through it, and I didn't feel like I was being supported or heard, or like my input was valued too much. I mean, I think that's a theme throughout people's careers, but like that young in the game, you don't know how to manage that. You don't know how to navigate that. And I just wanted to go home. I was like, personally, it was just too much. So I left, went home, and I worked in my aunt's beauty salon until I got a temporary job at Columbia, so that's how I got, really going.
How'd you get the temporary job?
I literally would walk around with a folder that said, get a job or die trying.
All right. All right.
And I would just hit up all these different temp agencies around the city. Like, look, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what my experiences have been. How can I be of value to your clients that you have? So,
wow. Okay. I love that. So what was your first role within Columbia?
I was a program coordinator.
Okay.
In the executive education department. So, like I didn't realize the magnitude of the stuff that I was doing then. I do now, like once you step out of it, I think you're like, oh, damn, I did that. But I was a program coordinator in the executive education department. And at that time, we were building a lot of custom programs for governments and NGOs and other nonprofits to come and get like management training or just like keeping up within the know of their field. And so the first group I worked with was a group of diplomats from Saudi Arabia. After Saudi Arabia had like got their seat on the UN Security Council, they came back to Colombia and said, hey, we want you to train our diplomats. Wow. So that was my first project and program at Columbia. That went really great. And then we transitioned into some other stuff.
So your role would be to design the courses for them to learn different skill sets and for them to grow professionally as diplomats?
Yeah. So that was some of my role as I grew into it, right? Like at first it was like, like do the orders, make sure the day-to-day is going well. And then it grew into that. We had a really great executive director. He's still there, Bill. And he saw something in me and like wrote me in and was like, let's do this thing. So that's when I got more into the curriculum design and planning, understanding what it was SEPA was great at and how to package that for these mini programs, who to tap, who to bring into certain things. That came, like in time. And it didn't take much time, but it definitely came in time. But I think that goes back to I've always been a nerd. So like that was definitely the part of the job that I enjoyed the most for sure.
Got it. What is SEPA?
Oh, what is SEPA? You know what SEPA is. I'm just kidding. SEPA is the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University.
That's right. So you were there. That's actually ultimately where you and I met.
Yes.
When I was working at Columbia University, doing a lot of community relations related work for their campus expansion into Manhattanville. And about 2 years into my job, well, backtrack. The first day I got hired, like full time, I was like, if I stay here, I'm going to get a degree from this place because you get a very lovely, hefty discount, which is the biggest career cheat code that I've ever seen in life.
Yeah. It's basically free for us.
Exactly.
Student activities.
Correct. So like legitimately day one that I was hired, I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to get a degree in, but I need to wait 2 years before getting it. So I'm going to figure it out within the next year so I can start the application process. And then I met you through going into the SEPA offices and trying to figure out like, well, what is this program? What do I do? And like, how is this going to be helpful and beneficial? And like, you were always very helpful, gracious, and informative on like, well, this is why this makes sense, Radhy. And this is what we're doing here versus what other places are doing. And you're free to go talk to people, but like, this is what we're doing. So it was always helpful to like have someone within that program that I can go to and try to just poke around and ask a bunch of questions, right? Like, and like figure things out. And you'd be like, just sit in on a class. Why don't you just go sit in on Joanne Bainey's class or on this other person's class? And like that to me helped me think about the potential that degree would unlock for me. So it definitely helped me. And ultimately, for spoiler alert, I went through the program and also graduated from the program. So yeah.
By then, was I your advisee? I feel like I advisor. I don't even know that. I'm like, was I working as an advisor when we met? I don't think you were. No, I think you were on the rise to such things. I don't think when I first met you, you were yet. So many moons ago.
Absolutely. So yeah. So, and I know you worked at Columbia for a little while. So tell me about the different types of roles that you had and how you were able to, one, position yourself for them, and two, grow professionally through them.
So it's been over a decade now, a decade between two schools with two very different populations. And, I don't think I knew that, like you don't know what you're doing when you're doing it, but you could look back on it and say like, haha, that makes sense. So, like we started off in program coordinating, doing the executive education, then we moved into the program proposal and build out process. I would travel abroad to meet with groups to, like get feedback and customize their program, come back and design it all, taking it through all of these steps. I think even after we did all of that, we then went on, we got like a grant and we built an online degree program. And so I got to see the state accreditation process. I got to see the pre-production, production, and post-production of online education. I got to understand what learning design looks like. And I was like, okay, that project is a wrap. We're now got students. Let's move on to something else. And so I was doing like administration and finance heavy, because what came from the online program was all this back-end admin, finance, and regulatory work. So I started living in that for a little bit. And then after that, I was like, I kind of want to work with the students again. And so I started advising and was the administrative director of the executive MPA program, which came with advising, but also overseeing the kind of classes that we offered, under the leadership of the executive director, making sure we were privileging the right courses in our curriculum and seeking out more to continue to diversify our offerings. And that sort of was like my last stop at SEPA. But by then it was like, I had done every role in the office. And so I really understood how to do academic administration, which, sounds like a boring job sometimes, but I look at it as like an honor because one, there's not many of us doing that, which speaks to the kind of things that we offer, what we privilege, what our student experience is going to be like. And so I do hold these roles and the things that I've been able to do with reverence because they were able to be done a different way. And I think that still is carried out. And then, as time came, I finished my master's while I was in that program. And I remember my ED.
What'd you do for your master's?
I did my master's at Teachers College at Columbia.
Okay.
And I got it in higher and post-secondary education, go figure.
So at that point, you were committed to staying within higher ed, and you were like, all right, how do I learn different things and position myself for more within this space?
Right. So by then I was like committed. Like I knew that was exactly what I wanted to do. And so I went for it, did the master's in that. And there was a type, they called us like scholar practitioners, which I think is a good way of saying you do this work with intentionality and that what you do always has like a why to it. So yeah, like I did all of that. And then towards the, like the end of my time there, I remember my executive director coming to me. He's like, we were like going to a capstone workshop. By then he was letting me run capstone workshops with him. And he's like, what do you want to do next, kiddo? I'd keep you here forever, but like that wouldn't serve you. That would only serve me. And, like I probably needed that kick in the ass to think about what was next because I was very comfortable there. Like it was a great opportunity. I got to travel. I knew the people, had great coworkers, but I did want an opportunity to be my own thought leader of sorts. Like you learn all of this stuff and you kind of want to steer your own ship. And so in that time, I was serving on the junior board of an organization that focused on college readiness. And I like that space. I like to help high schoolers on their road to college. And the director of pre-college came up at Barnard. And I was like, oh, this is perfect for me. And so, I feel like as with anything, it is a mixture of how great you are, but then how much you can move the people. So like in that interview process, it like, going through the interview process to get to Barnard, like it was a journey, but ultimately that was my next move. I became the director of pre-college at Barnard and did that, I think for 3 years through the pandemic. I took us online during the pandemic. Wow. And I knew how to take us online because I had designed this online degree program and it was at the same university with the same technology, the same central people. So like, as you're going through it, you don't know why. I'm like, why the hell am I building out an online program? But then it served me later, like in my director capacity. Did
you get the exposure to students again and that access that you were looking for in that role?
Yeah. So my students are much more transient in nature. I don't have like a set of students that stay with me. Returners, like we have some students that may come for 3 summers in a row before they get to applying to Barnard, and then they will actually matriculate in Barnard, right? But I get to be a part of their development. I think summer programs are really crucial, especially for students of, like underrepresented or historically marginalized groups. Super important to be exposed early because it's definitely not just about the academic setting and the classroom. It's the social capital that we struggle with when we get to these places, right? Like it's that piece that shocks and jars and displaces students from the pipeline. Like it's, so I think the summer programs gives them a space to combat that early and see what it's going to be like, to see that they can make friends. It's once again, going back to my analogy of it's a lab. It's a place for them to, sort of experiment and become okay with being away from home, and that they can do it and that the experience is for them. Absolutely. And I get to design those. So I think like that's really cool. Like
that sounds super cool. And it sounds like transformative experiences that can be made on campus within a summer. And it's one of those things that can really shift the way your mind is at the moment and the way that you think about your future in terms of college, careers, all of the things, just by having by having a good experience like that in one summer. So that's awesome. Yeah. And also, I do want to say, I think it's amazing that you have such great leadership, right? To be able to come to you and say, look, I can definitely keep you here and you're doing great. Or we could think about what's best for you in your career and how can I help you get there while I'm here?
Yeah.
And I think that is, one of the things that I've also been fortunate in having is really good leadership, but having folks that really are intentional about your progress, are invested in you, and are really pulling the strings when you know it and when you don't know it, to really make sure that you're like progressing in your career. I just think that's super crucial. And I love that, because once you see that, you're able to then emulate it, right? And you're able to then take that with you and become that leader going forward.
Yeah, I say like the hardest part of my job now, but even still the most rewarding, is the fact that I'm able to serve my, my supervisees as their manager. I very much I look at it as an act of service, like beyond just the tactical tasks that we have to get done in our job, is them as people. And we show up with all the things at work, but also like allowing them the space to grow, giving them what they need to grow, and having those hard conversations that are going to push them, to the next level. I think that's definitely now the most rewarding part of, my work.
No, but that's interesting, right? Because you do work with students and it's a very intentional career, right? And for you now, being on the supervisor side of things is really rewarding. And I think it's fascinating to me to see the growth in us as professionals and kind of what brings joy at different moments, because it could always be just the work, or it could be, an all-encompassing circle of things that bring you joy and make you enjoy what you do.
Yeah. It's it's all the thing.
Tell me about your role now. What do you like about it? What is your favorite part of your role right now?
So I think the role that I'm in now, funny enough, when I first got to Barnard, and we're a really small liberal arts college. Yes, we're a part of the greater Columbia University community, but Barnard is independent of Columbia, right? So our resources are not as expansive as some would say, the Mecca, which is Columbia University. Okay. So as all liberal arts colleges are doing, we're really being intentional with, looking at how we can bring in additional streams of revenue so that we can cut these tuition increases. We got to stop, right? And so one of the ways we were doing that at Barnard is we were looking at the puzzle of summer to say hey, what are we not looking at here that could be, bringing in additional streams of revenue? One of which was our leasing agreements with our summer conference groups, right? Those summer conference groups in the summer are a great way for colleges to bring in additional revenue. And then we had pre-college running, right? And those two weren't necessarily living in the same place, nor were they talking to each other. So they were cannibalizing one another. And so we were looking at this big map of things. And I literally said to my VP at the time, I said, I could do this job. I was like, next steps for me here. I was like, I know I just got here. I'll stop. But I'm looking at what you're doing and I'm like, I can do this for you. And I would take it would be great fun for me to do this. I was like, yeah, I can design curriculum and all of that is great, but this is what will get the people going.
Interesting.
And so I don't know, maybe she heard me and coupled with the success that we had in growing pre-college and she might actually know what she's talking about. After we took the program online post-COVID and, we were thinking about things innovatively, our president at the time gave me the chance and she was like, call it what you want. Summer is your thing, and we want you to explore different ways to bring our academic goodness and richness to an expanded community, high school, schoolers, continuing studies being the post-baccalaureate community, our summer conferences, we wanted to live under you and figure out ways that we can bring our, deliver or leverage our physical infrastructure during the summer. And then at that time, we didn't even know we were going to offer a summer session 4-credit classes, which is super important for a host of reasons. But then it was like, okay, well, we started offering this. High schoolers want to be exposed to 4-credit classes in the summer. We can do that. Give Barnard students more of an option of classes in the summer so they can take them at their home college and not away. Okay, all of that. One portfolio, one office, go for it. And it's a really unique way to look at summer on a college campus. When we go to these national conferences and we're talking about what we do in summer, we do it in a really different way because a lot of these different offices are decentralized, which often means we cannibalize one another, or we're not talking to each other, we're not sharing resources. So to be at a small college and be able to do it, it allows you to look at things differently, be a little bit more flexible with, your resources. But, it's a great portfolio. Like, I feel like I get to hop in and out of many different places. And yeah, it's just, I can be a dork about it.
No, it's interesting, right? Because I think you're ultimately, I like the puzzle analogy, right? You're like a puzzle solver of like, how do we pull things together, make things talk to each other that don't normally talk to each other, and make it all kind of work in cohort versus in parallel, right? And make sure that that it's all serving the greatness of this institution, and let's just make it all more cohesive. Mm-hmm. So tell me, what could you do with the skill sets that you've acquired over the last, at least over 10 years in academia, right? Like, what could you do with this what could be like a next role for you when you look at 5-10 years down the line? Like, okay, I'm not saying you're leaving your role, right? I don't want anyone listening to be like, oh, she's out. No. Like, no, right? But like, what could you do? What could someone with your skill sets how could those transfer to other things?
I've always said, like, I could do, I think my dream job, right? Like, what I could do next. And I very much see like this being a setup. And it sounds crazy because I do not have a terminal degree, but I always eyes on the prize. I would love to go back to my alma mater and be the college president. I'll say that out loud and on the record. But like all of my friends know that is a thing for me. But I think one of the things that people in summer have to be really good at is understanding a little bit about how everything works. And so to that end, a chief operating officer, a chief program officer, an innovation officer, you literally have to understand how everything works together in lockstep. How take one piece of the puzzle out destroys the whole entire puzzle. And you really have to be in tune with the implications of how, academic affairs rolls into res life, and how res life rolls into counseling services, and how counseling services may roll into dining. And it's not one thing, it's all of the things. And a lot of us, we work in our specializations, but we don't necessarily understand, or nor do we work on the, like, what are these things that, like, do we work on the tracks that connect everything? We tend to work, like inside, but we aren't, like the tracks connecting everything. So everything goes back to an analogy for me. But I think that's the way to explain it. And, like in higher ed, you find that a lot of our offices are decentralized, and it's very frustrating to students as they experience that, right? Because students don't understand that we actually have specialties, right? Like, they think that the person in student activities should understand scheduling like the registrar, and that the registrar should understand billing like the bursar, right? And so that disrupts the student experience because we don't know enough to share information in a way that makes that transfer over to the next specialty, seamless.
That makes sense.
And so in summer, you're forced to do that because typically speaking, you are a one-stop shop. And so to that end, I think my skill set is just that. And so I think it would serve well in like a chief operating officer role, or, like somebody who is next to maybe like the CEO or the president and is able to move them in strategy and give them insight on how to move the pieces on the chessboard. Right.
That makes sense.
I think that's where I live and like what makes it exciting. I don't think I'll ever be like a specialist, like, like in this very one area. I think like for me, my joy comes from just the dynamics of a role that allows me to see everything.
And the good thing about that type of skill set is it's not higher ed specific, right? Like you could very easily go to a large nonprofit organization and say, hey, this is how I can leverage my skill sets and bring it all together, make sure our programming is doing the impact that it's supposed to do, make sure our folks are talking to each other. Philanthropy, I can see your kind of skill sets just going to even government, right? Where like, especially a place like government that needs to talk to each other in different places, right? Like that type of skill set is very much needed. So I can certainly see you ultimately becoming the president of a bunch of different organizations, or as many organizations as you would like, including your alma mater. Right. You know, I think one of the things that I hear from you is that you're big on what brings you joy, what aligns with your impact. I'm very big on you don't have to be broke to have impact. So we'll love. Listen, we're not doing that.
People I don't sneeze for free.
Correct.
I tell everyone that.
Yeah, we're not doing that. So, so I'm very clear on that. So we'd love to hear a sense of how much money someone in your type of career can make.
I will start off by saying I may be an outlier in this field based on the conversations I've had with some of my peers. If I was to walk away from my role today, I would be looking for north of 200. So we're within that range now. And I will say it's comfortable. I think one of the issues, though, is that because the work that I do is outside of the typical degree program, it's hard to put a value on it for institutions. And a lot of us in this area of higher ed don't know how to talk about our work. And so if you don't know how to talk about your work, you don't know how to build a job description that is going to be effective to get you what you need. To that end, I understand how I protect you from liability. I understand how my business planning skills brings the money in the door and how it keeps expenses down. And so that is how we negotiate so that we're not broke in our passion, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, listen, I think that's one of the reasons why I started this whole endeavor was because when I was younger, I saw people in philanthropy specifically making over $200,000 at the time when I was like, that's a thing that you can do. And I didn't know that you could make that much money. I didn't know that you can do it and live comfortably and feel very much aligned with your skill sets and with the impact. So, I think I appreciate when I find people that are able to like walk that line of like, no, we need to be able to do things and be okay. And our family's going to be okay. And I'm going to make grandma proud and everybody going to be all right, So that's great.
I think it's hard too, like, especially for students who haven't seen the benefits of a college degree actualized in their household to envision that road. But I think it's also important, right, to talk about packages, because even like, there's a salary, but like there's your retirement benefits that adds to the monetary package, right? Like that we don't think about. There's health insurance. There's all kind of like backup care, tuition benefits, dependent care stuff. There's all kind of things that make up a total package. So like always want to make sure when, like students are looking at that for the first time, or people are looking at that going into these salaried career roles, that they're thinking of it not just as like the dollar amount on the paper. That's got to be cute too. But like your total package, what is that equaling up to? That's what's that's where the people get the people going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any forms of media that could be books, movies, shows, podcasts that have shaped you personally or professionally?
Oh, there's many. So I'll say when I first got back, I studied abroad in South Africa in undergrad. And when I got back, I really was on this quest to just understand like being a Black woman in these spaces again, because one of the things nobody tells you, and I don't know that anybody would know to tell you is like, as a Black person, when you go abroad to Africa, your experience in Africa is not a monolith either. I was specifically in South Africa. You aren't looked at as like, they don't consider you to be like an African, right? Like, but you aren't really American. It's just like this weird thing. And so when I got back home, it was once again that search for belonging because I had started that journey. All that to say, I got really into like self-help books written by other Black professionals that just like help you navigate the spaces, really just like pro-Black literature that just helped me be more sure of who I was in these spaces. All that to say, one of my favorites that I refer back to even now, it was a book written by, I believe her name is Karen Hunter. It was The Guide to Stop Being Niggardly and 9 Other Things That Black People Need to Stop Doing. And the book really resonated with me because, like I said, education has always been a thing for me. And because of that, you're othered in your community. Like for some reason, we think that the Black and brown experience is struggling in, you know, like, I don't want to say in America wholly, right? Like we say, oh, they're Black or they're Hispanic, they are struggling. No, that's not necessarily true, right? Like not at all, not by a long stretch.
Absolutely.
And so like being well spoken, well read, and well written was a knock, and it's something you want to hide. This book taught you how to live out loud and how to help others and bring them into that too. So that book is definitely like one of my top of the line up there. I'd also say, and this one is like historical fiction, but goes back to this theme of like belonging. I think for me, even as a professional, before anything, I'm a Black woman, and I'm like unapologetic about how that shows up for me in spaces and in my work. I think it's why I'm so great at my job, right? Like you have to think differently about everything, right? All the time. So Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi is one of my absolute favorites. It is a book that re-energizes me, but I think it speaks to the experience of a lot of, especially Black students on a college campus and wanting to be a part of something, you know, like searching for belonging and home. And so that is one of my favorites and like speaks to me. And it's, you know, like not a self-help or guidebook, but it was a pivotal read for me. And then as far as like a show, Insecure, like Insecure hits different on the second go around.
Got it. I love it. I'm all for it, man.
Yeah, but I feel like one of the big things is you want to feel like you're not alone, and you are working in predominantly white spaces all the time. It's very easy to feel that.
Absolutely.
And so that show, that like Different World, you know, like any kind of show that showed us in a space other than what they claim we were, you know, anytime a show just like shows us in living in a different way,
absolutely,
is one that's going to hit hard for me. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. And Insecure is always a good choice. All right. Is there anything else we haven't discussed today that the world should know about Aleschia?
I feel like no, I don't think so. Okay. I will say one of the things I live by, and if I could put it on a t-shirt, probably should put on a t-shirt. My grandmother used to say to me, and this is my grandmother who, you know, like, I don't even think my grandmother finished high school. She would say, if you would listen, life wouldn't be so hard. And I think she knew that from her own life. And so I think one of the things I've learned along the way is like a lot of times life is hard because we don't follow a path, or we, you know, like we don't listen. And so if anything, just listen to that inner voice as you go through things. Sometimes things that are good for you don't feel good to you going through it. But on the other side of it, it's goodness, it's success, it's happiness, it's wellness, but sometimes it looks different. So just listen to a higher power, to yourself, get mentors, get people who are going in the right track and headed in the right direction, who are like-minded as you, and just soak up the goodness so that you can continue to be great too.
I love that. That's great. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did and believe on the mission we're on, please like, rate, and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're using, and share this podcast with your friends in your networks. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Career Cheat Code, and tell us people or careers you would like to see highlighted. See you next week with some more cheat codes. Peace.